Oh, phone message.
Did you get any information on how long he's been drinking for? Because I'm sure it's not a new, teenagers during.
I don't know, Holly. I can only imagine probably for a year or two. Try to escape.
I recall a couple months ago that you were really worried that you'd have to use some force on him if stuff happened.
Yep.
Do you have a more human view of him, or do you still think he's going to be some surprise?
Nope. The worries are still there, but less.
Less. Yeah. As you're talking to him, you're getting a feel for where he is now.
I'm getting a feel, putting my foot through the rocks and feeling it out.
Yeah, and he seems pretty normal for someone of his age, and drinking.
Yes.
Relationships, exploring work, schooling. Pretty stable for the chaos that he grew up in.
Yes, correct. He had a cleft and palate center appointment down here on the 13th. He canceled that and rescheduled it because he was going to come and get his stuff out of his mother's house, and she's not giving it to him. She's withholding stuff, is trying to bait him and manipulate him to come down and move back home with her.
She's competitive.
So between Nurse Annie and me, we've talked him out of it. He's not coming down. Nurse Annie's going to pick up his diploma. We're both going to go up there to visit him, and hopefully his mother doesn't come up. So that could be a catastrophic failure. But we'll see.
The mother coming up to the meeting place, how would she know?
She knows where he lives.
Oh. Has she visited yet?
I don't think so, but I didn't ask him that. But it doesn't seem to me that she's been up there. It's a lot. It's a lot. All this in a couple of weeks.
This is what you were waiting for. Now you're getting the taste of his chaotic life and
drinking from the fire hose.
Oh.
What's that, Kelly?
Drinking from the fire hose, life.
Good analogy. Good analogy. Yeah. Go. That's my update. How's everybody else doing?
Other people's updates. Other people.
I saw Chantel that you got your finger the thing out. How's that doing?
Yeah, and I'm going to brag a bit because normally the finger will be stiff, but look what I can do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so pleased with that because that means it sounds so stupid, but I want to be able to do my own hair. And I cannot because I cannot do this and make something of my own hair. But if I can bow it, then I can do this. And so I'm practicing the whole day, every moment I have to wait. So I'm defeating the doctors because they told me I would never be able to do that. So
that's so awesome. That's so awesome.
It's just because I want to be able to do my own hair. So
yeah,
it's really silly, but
no, it's not. It's not at all. Yeah, it's a feminine.
A woman should
we do as
able
females. Yes.
Yeah, we should.
Well, I'm lacking in that area.
Yeah, but I have this long hair. I want to do these updos and do my own makeup really well. And so exactly. So
I'm happy for you, Chantal.
Yeah, I'm very, very pleased. And removing that steel pin, the pain is gone. So after 2 days, I don't have any pain anymore. So all the pain,
I know what that
like in
feels
the elbows, but also in my shoulder blade, it's gone. So it was really from the metal. Yeah. I had this strong reaction on the metal.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's such a relief because I can sleep well now.
Awesome.
Yeah. I slept like 14 hours last night. So, yeah, it's making me feel a complete other human being, sleeping well and not having that pain because it's dragging a lot of energy. Yeah.
Nice.
Me too. I have also this beep.
I'll just have a beep in the background. So that gets worse. I might have to.
Sounded like a UPS to me too.
Yes.
Made me go, wait, occupational hazard.
Yeah,
I got
I was
3 or 4 in
like,
here,
what's going on? Yeah. But anyway, that's my update. I'm very pleased.
Cool.
Well, that's update with the finger. Did you also have evaluation experience? Or you had 2 things, didn't you? You had the evaluation and you had the workshop or something.
Yeah. You mean the finger?
No, the autistic workshop. So
that was amazing.
The workshop or meeting the people. I thought the teachers were a bit.
Yeah, the teachers were neurotypical assholes. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Neurotypical assholes.
Come on. Then I don't know what part I think is worse. I think the belittling, like they know how people with autism work. Like, hell no. But okay. But beside that, all these people, so great. Like meeting adults with also in this high functioning autism spectrum. That's amazing. I got so much energy. All these social rules out of the window, disrupting everyone and jumping in and throwing stuff. Yeah, I like it. Really good. Yeah. Got some interesting links to other local people. Like there's one in the Netherlands who's already working with female SPs. So yeah, I tried to contact her today, but didn't get any reply. So I'll see, because we have this holiday weekend now.
If you were to get someone to help, what kind of skills would you be trying to work on? Or knowledge? What are you looking for?
Good question. Skills, I'm not sure, but the thing I would like to have a look at is this feeling of injustice, because it's always in, I don't know, it's surfacing at this moment. So I want to have a look at that. Maybe it's a common thing among people with autism. I don't know. So I would like to have a look at that. And then as a skill, I surely would like to understand more about how the storytelling goes. So this social brain, how that works, how that looks like.
How the social brain looks like.
Yeah.
So you think there might be an autistic expert that's going to be able to describe the social brain's landscape?
Yeah, I think maybe.
That would be something, yes.
So if I could get a feel of that and make the bridge, I could understand more.
John Elder Robinson, he got some TMS treatment, some magnetic stimulation on his brain that allowed him to get neurotypical appreciation of music and finally see stuff. He might have wrote a book on that. John
Yeah, there was
Elder
someone in
Robeson.
the group who was using, I don't know, some sort of
Switched on.
antidepressant. Yeah, and then he also got more insight into this social brain.
Mm-hmm.
He says he doesn't have to do all this mental gymnastics anymore, then it goes smoother.
Yes. So it
I
just
was
goes
like,
smoother.
oh,
Usually that's the report. Getting a map of how it works. That I don't know. That would be a good surprise if you could find someone that could do that.
I don't know. This Vera Helleman, she's quite good at explaining some of that stuff. So maybe I will figure it out. So John Elder Robinson. That's
Switched
correct?
On, 2017. Let me see. That's the title. And here's the Amazon.
Oh.
I'm skeptical because the people, neurotypicals who have it, it's autopilot, so they don't have to pay. They don't know the inner workings, and the people that get switched on through whatever mechanism, they start seeing stuff. So.
Yeah, that's more psychosis.
I mean, they start seeing they start seeing people's emotions, and they start seeing the social, the cues and stuff. They just recognize it, how that mechanism works and all that stuff. You might get some neuroscience maps, but that's not going to help much.
No. I don't know, but if I don't.
What if it's like a radio frequency that if you can tune into, then you can hear the messages, and if you can't, you're just not listening to that frequency.
Like the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Like bandwidth.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes
sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't get all the bandwidth. That's for sure.
You don't get all the bandwidth, and you might be on a slightly different frequency.
Yeah, so also.
Then you don't get all the extra chatter, too.
No, I don't need the extra chatter. Oh, gosh, who wants that?
No, that's the price of the people who have to deal with that. The signal's always on.
Oh.
So the signal's on, and they need help from other people to manage the signal. And when you add more noise to their signal, they don't like that.
Oh. It already sounds painful, so.
That's why that may be why they're sharing some pain with you, because you're not helping manage the extra noise, the extra internal noise, and the extra anxiety noise from the relationship. What's going to happen next?
Oh yeah, I can see that. Oh wow.
So that was the second thing. What was the first thing? First thing is you want to know about your feeling of injustice, or could you be more specific?
That's good.
This might match with the theme. We'll see.
It probably might, huh? How about that?
Let me try. So I had this moral outrage that these teachers, they were, I called them incompetent. Like they were really not tracking what was the audience doing. And then they claimed to be specialists in autism. And then they gave all these examples from little children or children in the age of 10 to 12 years. So when I asked for examples of adults, they just dismissed my whole question. So
yes, you weren't supposed to ask that.
No, I wasn't supposed to ask that. And I surely wasn't supposed to give a reflection that they were dismissive and that they were an excellent example of neurotypical. Anyway, I don't know what I said, but it offloaded my frustration for sure. But I didn't get any examples, so I didn't get what I really wanted. And then I was feeling out this frustration. It was a lot of rage, actually. It was not frustration. I was so fucking pissed off. And then sensing this out, it had more to do with injustice, unfairness.
Yeah.
I still feel it. Also sadness. So it was sad, hopeless, but mostly unfair.
So you had a small unfairness hit, and then underneath that was sadness.
Yeah.
And grief.
Grief, grief, mostly grief. So I could sense that it was old. It was built up, piled up from a lot of years.
From past situations where similar things happen.
Probably. I just sensed it to be like I just took one piece out of it now and rage about that, feeling pissed off, but it was just one piece of it.
I can feel that there's a lot more in there.
Yeah.
A lot more in there.
Yeah. And what I also sensed is that with the moral outrage, I freeze that whole mountain, that whole pile. It's like giving some air to it and getting something offloaded, but actually mostly the grief and the feeling of injustice. And what I would like to hear is, I'm sorry.
Because it's unfair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it unfair?
I don't know.
No, well, I'm asking you now so you can be better at understanding it, and that maybe neurotypicals might not be able to meet you or apologize, but maybe if you can find better voice, that might lower or ease some of the grief.
How about this, Chantel? How about their ignorance? No?
It's also I do really a lot of effort.
Yes, that's not seen. That's unwanted.
Yes.
And punished.
Yeah, the punishment. It hurts so bad. It's unfair.
Now, could the punishment be more? Could be added? Could there be more pain that it doesn't make sense from your side? Is there extra charge from their side?
Yeah. I feel like it's not only punishment, but I also get a part of their shit dumped onto me too.
Yes, you get that their policing or their superego energy, judgment energy, as part of this.
Yes, and it's a part of their guilt. I feel a lot of
Yes, you feel their guilt motivation. That would be their sadistic superego or academic superego.
Yeah, and it's also destroying the bridge building I'm doing.
That is the purpose
so
of it.
I'm opening up my heart. I'm trying to reach their humanity. And then in one they swipe away the
one
whole
vicious injunction, one violent slash, of
Yes, that's
a
how it
murderous
feels.
terror.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then it confuses me very much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what did I do wrong? And then I turn that confusion onto me, because I really don't know
What don't you know?
what I did wrong.
What you did wrong? You called out their humanity. You exposed their hijacked superego. You're challenging their expertise, their fawn self.
Yeah, but I'm masking too, so that's also not really authentic, I think.
You're asking too, so it's not authentic. What do you mean not authentic?
No, I'm masking.
You're masking too, yes.
I'm shape-shifting, so I do a lot of shape-shifting.
But they're masking based on appeasing their sadistic superego that's been hijacked. They're trying to serve this academic empathy, this groupthink sort of must conform
the academic
entity.
Ugh, that's so disgusting.
Yeah, but they're not allowed to say that.
I can see it in their eyes.
Yes, because their humanity is scared of that. Yeah. You're calling it out. You're saying it's disgusting.
Yeah, that's true, and you see it on
and
my
you're doing
face
it in
too.
public. They could be shamed and embarrassed. So that might make the superego a bit more vicious.
Yeah, that's why people don't like me.
No, the superego.
Okay.
You're exposing its limits. So you're getting to feel what their inner children feel like. How about that? So some of the superegos policing the punitive energy, the punitive inner parent, you're getting to feel what their inner children feel like.
Yeah, and that's very confusing to me. Like, are they doing it to me or to their own children?
Both.
I cannot distinguish that.
Both. All. They help other people's inner children get in line.
Yeah, it's always both. When it's one or the other, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels true, Holly.
I mean, our in-person group, we had an anxiety coach, and she was able to see that when her anxiety was going up, she was abusing other people's inner children, because that's why she's an anxiety coach, so she can be a wounded healer and flood other people based on her anxiety, and her superego thinks like she's helping other people. And sometimes she does, so the superego isn't always... Superego can't constantly trick the person, it's just sometimes the superego will go overboard. Because they haven't been initiated. So we have a society of a lot of people that haven't been initiated, so they still have fawn superegos. Or primitive superegos. Or William commented on Sam Backman's recent video where he's trying to say that, no, they're not primitive superegos, they're introjects, bad object internalization. But that extra label doesn't, just makes things more confusing. Yes, they have a toxic superego, and yes, a healthy superego is probably an authentic superego. So us calling a toxic superego might contradict some old person. So back to your question, back to your frustration, injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And sense of unfairness, and you have sadness and grief. So what's unfair?
The punishment. Like,
why is it unfair? It's kill or be killed. That's the rules. You're making an argument that's going against the meme. The meme is...
Someone doesn't need to play by your rules.
Sometimes things are unfair.
Someone doesn't need to play by your rules.
Sometimes things are unfair.
Someone doesn't need to play by your rules.
Sometimes things are unfair.
Does that describe the real world?
My rules. I don't think in rules.
So how is it unfair?
It feels like that.
Yes, that's why we're trying to get you to express it. Expressing it doesn't create magic. Expressing it doesn't mean other people are going to agree and help you. It's just helping you make sense of your argument. So now you can readjust and have a positive aim, and maybe you can figure out how to meet the needs of the sadness and the grief underneath. This is asking more than intellectualization, which ISTDP would try to do, and then I guess the therapist would try to do the sense-making. I'm trying to promote intellectualization and expression where you can do your own sense-making. Because I trust the process has intelligence. But it is a harder path.
Absolutely.
So if it's not matching this argument...
Someone doesn't need to play by your rules.
Sometimes things are unfair.
So how is it unfair?
I don't have words for it. It's a feeling.
It feels unfair. I can agree.
Yeah.
But even though it's unfair, and I get the same situations in the real world, it's pretty consistent. So if that's the rules of the jungle, that's the rules of the jungle.
Yeah, maybe have this I don't know, maybe a childlike expectation
of it's okay to have the expectation. It's okay to have desires. But if you're just crying unfairness, you want somebody else to fix it. That's a projection of will. That's an omnipotence defense. All very common with codependence. But you've been trying this unfairness plea. Is the world changing?
No.
So is it
not at
worth
all.
Considering trying something else? Trying a new thing?
Yeah.
Maybe if, Kelly sings it, maybe that.
Just try it. Try new things. Try something else. Just try it. Try
maybe
new things.
If we have the older
Try something else.
plea.
Just
try something else. See what happens.
Try something else.
Try something else. See what happens.
Try something. And yes, it's hard to describe.
It's hard to describe. It's hard to describe. It's hard to describe.
That doesn't mean you should give up.
It's hard to describe. It's hard to describe. It's hard.
Why is it unfair?
I don't know.
Or why does the unfairness hurt? Maybe if you can put words to the grief and sadness of receiving something that you feel unfair and unjust, then the formula, the value system you have, might be easier to see. Or what if the unfairness is not just your unfairness? What if you're merging with the inner child of the person with the superego? You're actually you've been projected identified to try to voice their inner child. To feel their pain. You've had the oceanic merging.
Oceanic union.
An invitation to dance.
Oceanic union.
An invitation to dance.
Oceanic union.
An invitation to dance.
These are a bit big concepts for YouTube to try to follow.
That feels more true.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel, yeah, yes, yeah. There's more about the both of us.
Yes. That's oceanic merging. That's a pre-verbal territory. That sometimes I feel like the other people's inner children are calling to me to fix things, and to calling for me to be their voice.
Yeah, I can.
And then I get put in a double bind because the superego has a different goal for fallen self and the inner child, and I tend to still try to address the inner child, and the academic superego will come in. It feels unfair, sure. But I can try to turn that into some learning and growth. Because you want somebody to hack out the neurotypical social mind. But while you're hunting for somebody to do that impossible thing, I can put that on my list of other projects for other people I can do. I forget myself, so might as well dive into other people's problems.
Yeah, I think, no, I'm sure what hurts most is that destroying of the bridge. I'm already making a bridge, and then the punishment destroys completely that bridge building, that reaching out.
Yeah.
And that hurts most.
So they're exiling your attempt.
Not only exiling, it's...
And punishing, yeah.
Destroying.
What else?
It's
destroying, yeah.
Erasing. Yeah, erasing. That's the correct
voicing.
word.
Absencing.
Yeah, devoicing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah.
What if that's part of the moral contract? What if that's part of the neurotypical, the dominant culture's moral contract? That they want everyone to get in line with this sort of civilized way of interacting.
Oof, I get so pissed off now.
Yes, but
yeah,
you can get pissed off. Everybody who's in the water, who's a fish, is terrified of getting pissed off.
Why?
Because they feel the pain that you're feeling, but they feel it 24/7.
Oh, wow.
Don't they complain about a toxic inner critic that's nonstop, and they have to get this meditation app and go on this retreat and do yoga and do all this stuff to try to soothe their inner critic? Isn't that a common complaint?
I don't have it. I don't know.
Yeah, but have you seen other people have it and act it out? Don't you see all those spiri weary people? Don't they seem they're putting a lot of effort to soothe their anxiety?
Yeah.
Why would they be putting all that effort to soothe their anxiety?
Yeah, if they're 24 anxious about that devoicing that I sense just...
Mm-hmm. You just got a little taste of. Yeah.
Oof, that sucks. Oh. Wow. I didn't know.
You don't know, because their inner child is not also not able to plead with you and share their stuckness, their sadness and grief. So projective identification, they give you the direct experience. Maybe that's what was happening in the Discord where I got a bunch of confusion. Somebody's giving me a direct experience of confusion and spinning. It's not pleasant.
No. I get that. Oh, yeah. Oh, fucking yeah.
But if they're just giving me a taste of it and their whole life of that is that, maybe they have like a beep that's going on randomly all the time. Wouldn't that be annoying?
Yeah. I'm sorry for them.
Yes. See, so pity is a way to build your containment, to recognize that other people's defenses are pretty fucking annoying because they're painful and frustrating and flooding and contagious and have some annihilation in there too.
Yeah. Yeah, the erasure.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't exist.
Yes, you don't exist. That's the exile part.
I know exactly what you mean, Shinto.
But maybe there's a way out. We're not going to fully go with this way out, but by Andy talking about this, maybe there's a way out, though Andy Austin, I think he identifies a little bit as autistic, so maybe... Oh, so maybe you might be able to have a way out, but this might not be a way out for neurotypicals. He gave some commentary of the power of this social rejection that a lot of people are obsessed over.
So many stupid social behaviors that people engage in are to control this one variable. How we feel when the people we really like don't like us back. This one variable don't like us back. So you want to be friends with that person, you really like them. In the workplace, you want, you want to be in part of their gang. But they don't like you. This one variable. They don't like you. They will turn on the people they liked because it wasn't reciprocated. They get rid.
This sort of not reciprocated flip is sort of a social splitting that happens that's pretty common. And autopilot, and might not be like fragile splitting, it's just pretty common, I would argue. Oh no, my mouse is slowing. Can I get there? Okay. Back. Now, will it play?
Angry and upset, and they turn on them. This
there.
On the people they liked because it wasn't reciprocated, they get really angry and upset, and they turn on them.
This is tricky. This is negation. It is a defense that John Fredrickson recognizes really easily. But I still have trouble recognizing negation. It's a subtle form of denial where people negate it, but they're actually admitting that they're bothered by something. So they'll invest in the opposite of hating the person they want to bridge with. And it looks like that on the surface, but it's actually a message that they're hurt and they wanted connection.
This one variable. Because it wasn't reciprocated, some people are absolutely crushed by it. And they will do everything in their power to avoid ever having that in the first place. They'll never take the social risk, for example. So many stupid social behaviors that people engage in are to control this one variable. And when you're free from this, when what you feel for other people does not need to be reciprocated, it doesn't need to be. The freedom that brings the individual is amazing. This is stuff from like junior school. It's not even high school stuff. It's
this junior school superego update was probably modeled by the Zoom bombers. And if codependents had to become a parent for their child, had to grow up too early, they weren't able to fully explore and integrate a rebellious self in the teenage years. So there's a fawn self that's overperforming, and it's probably using a likability strategy because most of the mental health people are losers as in popularity. They're social misfits growing up. So they play the likability game, and they have a lot of resentment against the popular people in middle school. So they're not socially skilled, especially the autistic social skill teachers. They're like in the middle of of this popularity chain. Or maybe they're at the bottom, so they're the middle bottom. So they're trying to teach, they're trying to socialize the world into the way they think fairness should be and likability should be. And they're using a superego hijack to enforce it. Or someone who's a natural popular person, or natural creative. They're popular. They have the it. They have something. They just intuitively know that. And they have trouble teaching that to others. They're just cool. So, back to the video.
Little kiddie stuff. And yet on the internet, I watch fully grown adults who think they're mental health professionals engage in this behavior. It's all about a sense of controlling who likes me and who doesn't. Controlling and being in charge of that.
So if you have somebody who's overly controlling and overly wants to be dominant, they might be controlled by a punitive superego. Especially if they're a teacher and academic, because if you're a teacher and academic, other people don't get to talk. Okay? Other people don't get to ask questions that challenge their expertise, unless Chantal's in the audience. Not just that, they could do this and they get paid for it. I mean, it's pretty good. They got a job that pays, and they can hoard a bunch of control.
When you allow other people the choice to believe in whatever political thing they want or religious thing they want, and we don't have a requirement for them to change the way they see the world and change the way they see themselves, we can just leave them alone and interact with them.
So that's the betrayal right here. When you feel outraged, then the part of you that's outraged wants to socialize them into your version of fairness. You want somebody to finally see your pain, and maybe you'll have to socialize them. But if you want to socialize them, shouldn't you have to see their pain too? Shouldn't it be two-way? You're the one who's saying you want a bridge. Are you willing to also be a bridge and see their nightmare inside of their head? Not so easy. Yeah.
To change the way they see the world and change the way they see themselves, we can just leave them alone and interact with them. The freedom that brings is immeasurable. What you feel for other people does not need to be reciprocated.
Now this injunction, if you were to take this as an injunction, it'd just be another superego overriding. You have to get to this position of having some sort of secure sense of self and belonging in the real world, which maybe we'll try to address by Act 3, but probably not. That's really hard. I, the reckless, crazy person, will still try to make links. I don't know. John Fredrickson also sort of talks about this in this similar territory. This is a nice way of looking at codependence.
All patients enter with the history of dependency. So although they want to join you, the fear is, if I depend on you, which I really want to do, my past tells me that something really bad is going to happen. That's why mixed feelings, mixed motivations get stirred up. There's always a transference coming up. I want to have a new relationship with you, but I'm afraid that this old relationship is going to happen here, which would be just traumatizing and disastrous. My past tells me that something really bad is going to happen.
So let's try to mentalize the the autistic instructors, teachers, right? So if Chantal, you're asking for input and questions, like, what are your qualifications? Can you tell me how to work with how you've worked with adults? Can you address my issues? Are you asking them to depend on your question? Are you asking them to be vulnerable for you?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that a question they're prepared for? Have they dealt with it? Is it a question that's comfortable to them?
No, it wasn't.
And then when they didn't answer it, were you understanding of why they didn't understand it?
No.
Okay, and was your
like,
tone
what the fuck?
And was your energy coddling for their overexposed inner child? Okay.
No, if I'm pissed off, you see it on my face.
Yes, so if you have this pissed off energy, and they have this pattern of social rejection in the past, this fear.
My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really...
Why are they a teacher?
Yeah, because they can talk down. And they
because it's equal. Something really bad's going to happen. Something really bad did happen because they were losers in school, or they were near the bottom. They were fear. They weren't at the top. I wasn't either. I was a loser in school too, but
yeah,
I didn't care so much. But these are people that maybe cared more.
Oh yeah, okay.
So they cared more. So they have this.
My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen.
So if you throw a bomb and introduce a new question, and you have outrage expressions in your body when they're not meeting your question and your need, that might trigger this pattern.
My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen.
Guilt.
My past tells me something really bad's going to happen.
Guilt.
My past tells me something really bad's going to happen. My past tells me something really bad's going to happen.
We'll have to talk about anxiety. We'll have to talk about anxiety. We'll have to talk about anxiety. We'll have to talk about so it's a desire to escape about anxiety. So it's a desire to escape. So it's a desire to escape. So it's a desire to escape.
Out on stage.
So it's a desire to escape. So it's
you're overexposing them.
So it's
they're feeling anxiety, and they have a desire to escape.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to use a severe method to cut you off.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Because they were giving an example of a 10-year-old, so I asked them, and I was polite. I was not worked up or pissed off yet. I said, do you also have an example from adult point of view? I would like to hear that. And then she dismissed that question, and then I got pissed off, and I said my remark about dismissiveness. So, yeah. No, I didn't see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can I ask a question then?
You didn't see their fragility. You want them to see your fragility, but did you see theirs?
Do I want to see...
You want them to see your fragility. You have a question. The question is something that's a struggle of yours, right?
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
But
yeah, exactly.
They also have a struggle and frustration. Granted, they don't overtly share it, but no one overtly shares their fragile questions because the world hammers you.
So I had to ask the question in private then, during the break? Or that would be threatening?
You could, but maybe they don't have an answer to your question. Maybe they don't know.
How can you be an expert running for 11 years a business with adults and not having examples? Like, what the fuck?
Look at your tone. You're talking to me with this tone. Do you imagine if I was a teacher taking a lot of pride in helping lesser functioning autistics and brainwashing them and feeling like I'm saving the world?
Yeah.
I need that supply, because if I don't get that supply, my inner critic, my sadistic superego, is going to say I'm a loser all the time, and I'm going to have nightmares for 3 days. I'm taking antidepressants. I'm going to weary things and hanging out with pedophile teachers because I want an escape from my inner turmoil.
Wow, this sounds so complex, so...
You wanted a map of the neurotypical social brain. This is part of my theory.
They also work hard, then.
The superego is a pretty mean, relentless slave driver. Seems to be.
I have one too, but not like that.
Superego is a cunt. Yeah.
Wow.
This wasn't really the plan. I wanted to set something up for this. So there's a paper that's written about working with schizophrenic superegos, but the person who wrote the paper said the schizophrenic superego can also work with personality disordered superegos, and probably also codependent toxic superegos. So. Try not to get caught up with just a schizophrenic superego term. This might give you a hands-on view of how, what kind of inner turmoil a sadistic superego that's hijacked might be causing. I'll put a link in the chat. This is, I was able to find it publicly. This paper is getting me to question my stance, because my stance has been to try to befriend the superego. Or cooperate, or work with it. But if the superego is this level, this person's advocating to be aggressive against the superego. And that sort of matches John Fredrickson's approach. But first you have to separate the superego from the person, so they don't feel like it's a full-on attack. We'll go and just describe some traits, and if you guys want to read more, or we can discuss this more later. The nature of the superego. I'll just call it a toxic superego, because schizophrenic is a long word. It's easier, and then maybe Sam Backman won't like it, and they'll say it's a bad object internalized. Whatever his term is. If you could make it a little more catchy, I'll switch to Backman's term. But toxic hijacked superego. What is the nature of a toxic hijacked superego? All toxic superegos lie. One can easily make the mistake of thinking that any particular superego is ignorant or foolish or sick itself. If one makes that mistake, one will both waste time and mislead the patient. The toxic superego's intent on keeping its home and torturing the patient as much as it can. The latter ensures the former. So, by torturing the patient, the language of agency, pain in the language of agency is trying to describe the nature of torture. so people could have some agency to fight against the toxic superego. But maybe they also need somebody else, a co-historian, to help role model how to fight against the superego with some emotional intensity, because the superego is just a construct. My theory is it's a construct of your abuser. So you have an internal construct, so then you can prepare and practice for your actual abuser. So it's adaptive in that mechanism when you're young. But now as an adult, if you're not dealing with your parents as an abuser and they're not giants anymore, this construct is outdated. So the toxic superego knows the truth very well, but it does not want the patient's ego to know it. So it wants to keep the patient's ego and ids in the dark. Number 2, all toxic superegos want to kill the ego. The toxic superego wants the patient to feel as guilty as it can. It wants to disable him or her as much as it can. Sometimes, of course, it does drive the patient to suicide, as if it could survive the patient's death. So in this person's experience, Ravella Levine, this is the only error that the superego makes. That the superego would survive. The patient dying, the host dying. And then this is a phenomena that she believes Freud mistook as a death instinct. I still like the death instinct thing. A lot of people don't like it, so everyone has to put some hate on it for some reason. All toxic superegos, when they are challenged sufficiently, and as I say, with their backs against the wall, will finally admit the truth. And the truth is that they hate the patient. They want to kill him or her. In the case of a patient who is less sick, damage him or her. Doesn't this sound familiar to Richard Brannon's Crazy Making? Or let's see, where is it?
You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. They're there to get under your skin, under your skin, under your skin. Make you have doubt, have doubt, have doubt. Laden with contempt, contempt, contempt. Laden with contempt. Dagger driven into you. Dagger driven into you. Dagger driven into you. Dagger.
Seal an insult in the terminology. Seal an insult in the terminology.
Aren't those descriptors a description of a sadistic drive? And if a narcissist doesn't have a healthy ego or has no ego, and they're fully taken over by a negative internalized object, internalized negative, whatever vacuum, an interject, a negative interject, a fake superego. Their superego has been hijacked. The superego is the moral principle that helps you navigate what's fair in the world. And if it's been hijacked by this kill or be killed, sadistic, torturous energy that hates the patient, hates the inner child, and wants to kill any other inner child, and takes a lot of joy in it, would that make sense that, Chantal, when you call out that superego, that they're gonna take it out on you?
Yeah, of course. I don't hold onto the rules, these unspoken rules.
Not just unspoken rules, but the superego wants to stay in charge, and it's staying in charge through torture, through self-hate, through self-attack. Through dominance. BDSM. That's why the dominant submission part is probably a useful role play. But people get lost in the sex. Or the whatever taboo, but learning how to battle within dominant submission and learn the rules of the land. Learn the rules of the jungle, then the superego can't be posturing nonsense. The superego is gonna have a lot of mind games to present all this hate and damage and words to almost cause suicide. But it's just a construct. That'll come later. And then number 4, this isn't worded as good, but because the Macbeth thing, I read it to Zoe and I still don't understand it, but all toxic superegos promise always to take care of the owner. But that taking care of is a particularly insidious promise. That taking care of means like a mafia type of taking care of.
That's what I was just saying.
Yes,
it's like
can someone explain that?
Racket.
Yes, it's like a protection racket. It's a racket.
Exactly, precisely.
So it's a protection, but it's backed up with posturing, with bullying, with you better listen. I'm acting nice, but really, if you don't follow it, I'll take care of you through torture, through destruction. It's very misleading. And then superegos are sometimes silent at times. So they like hiding in the background.
Damn trollers.
And then I think that the superego being in the background is maybe part of why there's paranoia. And then the tricky superego is displacing the paranoia by whispering voices in the head like, oh, this is dangerous, this person's dangerous, can't trust this, can't trust that. The paranoia is there caused by the superego, because the superego is giving you crappy moral advice. It's hijacked the moral navigator, your moral compass of how to navigate safety, danger, get from point A to B, get your needs met. And it's throwing a bunch of noise so that it can stay in control, so that it can protect you from your crazy parents. It's lost in time. You're not a kid anymore. You're not stuck by the crazy parents. The superego wants to appear to be the patient's friend and not be blamed or have its cover spoiled. So it convinces the patient that it is the man on the subway who is demonstrating hostile behavior. That'd be projection. Projection of the self-hate is disowned aggression that's projected onto other people. That'd be the complicated ISTDP description. So such a maneuver can result in the patient attacking the subway rider verbally or physically. Certainly, if there is a great deal of such trickery by the superego, the patient will feel the whole world as hostile. So here are some tips on how to deal with the superego, and this is something I'm still trying to adjust to. Because I like attacking defenses, but maybe I have to figure out how to attack people's superego. I think more morality is sort of off limits, but if people have a hijacked the morality principle, okay, maybe it's fair game. So this person, I do not waste my time arguing about the patient's competence. The superego knows perfectly well that she is competent. I never, or I try to never go on the defensive. I simply attack. This serves to decrease the patient's isolation. Every patient with whom I've used this technique tells me how important it is to have someone on their side. From that standpoint alone, my talking to the superego serves the function of decreasing isolation while giving support to the patient in his or her endless battle to prevent damage and death to her identity. She must learn to attack. A shield is insufficient. A lance or sword is also required. It appears to take a long time for the patient to learn how to attack. It seems to me much more of an emotional rather than an intellectual obstacle. So the superego hijacks the father principle. I was going to try to lay this out and share this at the end, but one, two, three. I, me, mine. And then the I position is agency. So people who like play the pronoun game, they give up their agency. Their innocence is lost. They've given up their infancy. They've given up the ability to feel like and to be able to communicate their infant ant, their infinitely small part, or their infinitely small fragmented parts. The I position. Being. Maybe the doorway to the soul. They've been parentified, so they have to jump into the mind. Number 3. Becoming. And becoming is part of the morality principle. Nicholas is trying to grow up in the world. He wants to learn. He's looking for father figures to figure out how to become in the real world. But you can also use your mind to become in fantasy. You can also use your mind to twist other people's becoming. So you can become a teacher, a coach. You can become an autistic helper to help other people's minds become. And you could overuse fantasy. In the middle is belonging, and then I'm not sure if these things are perfectly linked, but this is what I intuitively tried to map out in August 2021. Mother is the middle ground, and then father is you have to learn how to be out in the real world. So mother is my other, so that's merging, object relations, positive breast, negative breast. Self and other are merged, so we spend a lot of time with mother. This number 2 need, belonging. But the superego that's hijacked, that's absented, I would argue, is a father wound, an absent father, an undeveloped mind, inability for critical thinking. Part of critical thinking is faith in error. You need to take risks, learn from mistakes, try something different, develop your faith based on making mistakes. Your toxic superego is going to do the opposite and try to promote perfectionism. Error is dangerous. Do not have faith in error. Have faith in punishment. Have faith in toxic, whatever, trickery, mind games. Play mind games instead of using your mind to become. That's the flip that the toxic superego has done. And there's no father figures in the world, or there's a lack of them. So you see a lot of young boys looking for that, but also a lot of girls have father issues or daddy issues. They're looking for how to become. At the same time, today I also said father could be future author. So your father is a father figure that helps you author your future, how to have a narrative that connects your past, present, and write your future on the fly. So you're using your mind to set goals and navigate and pull resources and co-historians so that you can create something permanent or something lasting or something meaningful in shared reality. That's the path of mastery. That's the path of skill. But a hijacked superego, they're going to flip the mind, using the mind to become something bigger, and they're going to use the opposite. They're going to use the mind to stop other people from becoming. To hijack, to destroy stuff, because that's easier, that's quicker, that's less risk. And this sadistic superego has a little bit of murderous drive, so it enjoys blowing up stuff. I mean, I enjoy a good explosion. So. We had a battle at the in-person meeting where one person was trying to play this language game about anxiety versus nervousness. And then she gave some formula like, oh, anxiety is in the future. So if I just stay in the present, I don't have to worry about anxiety. And then I tried to say, well, that's a pretty decent strategy, but the price of that strategy is that if you stay in the present, somebody else might be stressing in the future. So you're dumping your stress load on someone else. As an example, do you want our president to use this strategy? Social Security is going bankrupt. There's an enemy that's about to attack us. That's in the future, so the president should just not feel that, because that's anxiety. The president should just be focused on the now, because that doesn't have anxiety. She wasn't willing to entertain that, so she said, oh, that's planning. Planning and anxiety is different. So she's playing this defined game with different definitions. Maybe she was caught up with her toxic superego trying to defend herself in trickery. So it got heated a bit. And then she disproved her thesis. Because she kept defending and she was worrying about getting kicked out of the next meeting. And none of that happened, so she was being anxious about the future, where she held this great, amazing tactic of saying, I can manage my anxiety by just being in the now. But after the meeting, or at the end of the meeting, she was energized. Part of her liked the fight. Maybe parts of her like being in this number 3 space of mind versus mind, battling things out, testing what works, testing what doesn't work, building this muscle. So, this person says that there's a different tone to the superego and ego, so this could be a tool. Welcome, Nick and Maria. I also encourage the patient to be auditorily sensitive and to distinguish the tone of the superego from the voice of the brain, which she'll refer to as the ego. I want her to be on alert as much as possible, so as soon as she hears that instrument of the superego, which has a certain vibe or tone, then he or she can be on guard. How do you recognize the voice of the superego? The content always has a moral injunction, which implies or overly states, you should not have, you should have, you should not have. That is right. That is wrong. That would be right. That would be wrong. It could be like, you should have read the book. You should have known this. You are all fucking bad because you didn't do this or that and that. That can be like bad God, omnipotent defenses, projective identification, all kinds of pointers we put out there. It still feels pretty vicious to be on the receiving end of that. These are references to behavior or speech. as if there's only one correct way to speak or behave. The idea of relative morality is unacceptable to the superego. In the same way that the Christian right finds relative morality abhorrent. What's the question? Private question. What's the answer? How to take on difficult, anxiety-provoking tasks and get through well without a worse outcome? You just try it. That's a superego that wants to control the risk. The real world is you try something, fall on your face, get up and try something again. There's no way to shortcut life experience. If you have somebody that's promising you the shortcut of life experience, of pain, that's somebody who's possessed by a sadistic, toxic superego that's hijacked. The superego promises to always take care of and never abandon the patient. It'll be overly persuasive. It'll be grooming. It might be massaging you in the middle of the night and giving you all kinds of sweet nothings because the superego always wants to be in the ear. It can't be mean all the time. But in contrast, the ego never does that. The ego's attitude is that it's being taken for granted by the patient, in much the same way that you and I take for granted that our hand is not going to fall off. So the ego is always there as a reserve, but it's always there, so we don't have to say, oh, it's about to leave us, because it's part of us. It doesn't need to constantly announce it's there. Does your foot constantly say, like, oh, I'm here, hi, yeah, this is your foot saying hello today? Then when you go walk, do you have to, like, check, make sure you have your foot? You just take it for granted, because it's part of you. Number 3, the superego insists that it can always control the patient. It threatens him with guilt and causes him irrational anxiety. What is guilt?
Guilt. Codependency. Guilt. Top down. Guilt. You tell me what to think. Guilt.
Superego injunction. Superego injunction. Superego injunction. Superego injunction. Don't do that. We'll have to talk about anxiety. We'll have to talk.
Guilt.
Ooh, 8:40. We're just talking about superego all meeting. Threatens with guilt and causes irrational anxiety. Actually, I don't know if this would totally fit, but a lot of mental health overfocuses on guilt, and then it doesn't address the torn soul. It doesn't address pure being. It doesn't address belonging. It doesn't trust being. It tries to address belonging, but if you have no center, if you haven't found your voice, you're not expressing your needs. So if somebody gives you fake acceptance, it feels good. It can trick you into thinking that you have belonging. But if you have no being, you don't know your beingness, your belongingness is empty. So, in the old days, you'd have to label this with healing the shame that binds you, John Bradshaw's framework.
Block Lewis did a study of 180 psychotherapies, and she...
Why is it blurry? Okay. 180 therapies. Okay.
180 psychotherapies. And she found when the therapist, if it was a shame-based person, if the therapist treated the guilt, the therapy went on and on and on and on for years.
Years.
When they treated the shame, there was recovery. And I'm going to tell you that I went to therapists, I went to psychiatrists, and they dealt with my guilt. They didn't deal with my shame.
And if they're dealing with the guilt, they're building up a fake superego. They're teaching you to gaslight yourself. We've tried to cover this with so many different angles, but the superego takes control of the healing process. Ravella's technique is to join forces together so we can beat down some of the excess superego energy and help it dissolve. Would that make your healing process better? Maybe that'll give a little bit more room so you can get connected to your being. And then you'll get being, belonging, and becoming. Stop trying to fake becoming or trying to control other people's becoming and somehow think that's going to lead to magically you get being out of nowhere. So being might be the territory of toxic shame or spiritual bankruptcy.
Wasn't until I hit a 12-step program where I'm John, I'm powerless, I need help, I come out of hiding, I go to these meetings.
See, those are all I statements. I am an infant. I am an infinite ant. I am infinitely fucking limited. I am infinitely addicted. I am infinitely a fucking peon. Let me have that as a starting point. Then this seed can sprout and grow into some potential, but I have to start with owning how much the suck is. If I have some fucking fake mother that gives me fake validation that says, oh, you belong, you're welcome. Whatever you're saying, you're welcome, while I abandon your anxiety or cover it up. That's not belonging. That's conning. That's a mind game.
See, then the healing begins. But you've got to be willing to come out of hiding. You've got to be willing to get some kind of healing by coming out of hiding. As long as you stay in hiding, there's no way. And the hiding can be a mask. It can be playing a macho male role or a perfect lady role. It can be delusion and denial. We've got to break down those things. We've got to feel as bad as we really feel.
This sounds easy. We got to feel as bad as we really feel. Why is this so fucking hard for people to do? We just need some people to step forward and own their suck. Role model it to us, and then see that we don't die. Or that person doesn't die because they felt their suck. They felt their grief. Maybe they cried for 3 days, but they got up afterwards. That's why we need a sadness master, and I'm still looking for someone to be a sadness master. Or I can just, give myself more grief, and eventually I'll reluctantly try to fit the role. I do not think that's my role.
In order to get well from shame. Quit pretending. Let them love on you. Let them bandy around you and support you a little bit. Quit having to be God. And if we're going to heal the shame,
in a sense right here, quit having to be God. He's yelling at the people's toxic superego. Because he has some preacher background, I think, so he's able to preach and try to evoke the fear of God in people to sort of shut down or calm down people's sadistic superego. Sadness Master. Part of the Sadness Master, I think the Sadness Master is number 2. So number 1, your being, by owning your infinite ant, that's your mouse, that's your fearful part, that's your scared shitless baby. And then number 2 is your sadness baby, belonging. And number 3 is your mad baby, your rage and your hatred. That's why the superego wants to hijack number 3, because it can hold number 2 and number 1 hostage. If you integrate your superego and have a healthy moral principle, your healthy moral principle will be able to express your needs and wants, your sadness and your fear, and find the right people to share it with to help you navigate your life. So that's why number 3 is very powerful. Number 3 is your father power, your masculine energy to take on the world and conquer and kill the dragon and get the princess. And number 3 might be the thing that gets hijacked to sort of take over, to be a parent for your child. Parentified or spouseified. So number 3 gets activated too early, and then scared shitless baby number 1 and sadness baby number 2 get exiled. They're in the way of the performance. So anxiety is shut down, and it's covered up with nonsense grief that's driven by mind games from the sadistic superego.
We have to be willing to come together and to admit that we feel bad, that we're hurting, that we're vulnerable or whatever. So the healing of addiction is the healing of relationships. I had a relationship with alcohol. I had a relationship with Tuinol and Seconal and Nembutal. I mean, they were my lovers. What I found is that if I would turn to people, and if I would share, and if I would take the mask off and feel as bad as I felt, that healing would come. Quit reading how-to books and be real. Be where I am. Express my feelings. Allow mistakes to happen. Allow mistakes to happen. Allow mistakes to happen.
Allow mistakes to happen. Have some faith in error. That's developing a relationship with mistakes. That's sharing your mistakes with others. That's sharing your mistakes with others where others will help you accept that mistake as a starting point. And then hope can come after that. But a lot of people are rejecting the mistake, which would be a schizoid defense or a splitting defense. And then they're validating you with belonging with fantasy, shared fantasy. Because there's a lot of tricky superegos out there. Number 4, the superego also implies that all negative conditions are irreversible. That is, you are stupid, implying that they can never be otherwise. You are stupid forever. Time distortion. You are just stupid to infinity, and somehow they can make it feel really vicious. The ego, however, causes anxiety for realistic consequences. For example, if one is about to be hit by a car, one can quickly move out of the way and save oneself. So the ego uses negative emotions too. But they're trying to help you adapt. Your superego will hijack you with negative emotions to just make you feel bad. Because it's toxic. And it's vicious. It's like the serpent voice. The superego pretends to be a friend, but in fact it is destructive. Don't try to gain anything. You'll only get hurt. Don't try to succeed. You're gonna fail. Don't trust this person. Don't trust that person. Stay fearful and just cling to safe spaces. But in fact, the superego fears that the patient may be successful. One important fact that the patient can discover is that she can make the superego afraid, not just the other way around. So it goes both ways. So if it goes both ways, the superego is battling for the soul. It's battling in number 1 territory. So it can evoke fear from you, from your infant, from your scared shitless baby. But you, or the group, can also evoke fear in the superego. Can we collectively figure out how to evoke fear in everybody's toxified superego? Would that make the healing journey easier? Or could we lower the fear from it by building up more of an ego? This will be a future case study. We'll try to integrate more of these insights. Number 6, the superego will increase its dislike of the therapist as it sees the patient improving. This is the counterintuitive thing that if I'm working with certain people or we see someone and then they might suddenly distrust, or the superego might get more panicked because the superego is losing its power. So then the superego might just throw a giant confusion bomb in the Discord to try to make Deep feel like a failure, like he has made no ground before, or wasting time into a spinning black hole. But I'm patient. I'm stupid. I'll take torture. Maybe it's a panicked out superego that's getting desperate. So I can feed off people's desperation too. So maybe I'll go crazy. That's the price of being so reckless, but so be it. Number 7. The superego attempts as much as possible to make the patient dependent on it and isolate it from other people. For example, one's spouse, friends, therapists. Narcissists also do this, and if the narcissist is basically just an embodied superego that's fully possessed that person, then it'll be able to do all this stuff for themselves and other people. Number 8, the superego lies, tricks, and manipulates. And that superego will try to blame the other person that's not doing it and try to project all that paranoia outward. Because that's how it shows love. Trauma bonding is so intimate. The superego's criticism is always destructive, not constructive, unlike that of the ego. Making a plea for the person to say something constructive, and if they just say more destructive stuff, they might be speaking from their sadistic superego. What's our time box? 8:55. We'll get to the do's and don'ts in a minute. Is that too much? Are people able to follow? Do people want to add something? How's it landing? Does anyone want to read the live chat? Because I haven't been following it. I think it's only one person that's chatting.
Is that in the post is that in the link you post, the Google Doc? Were you reading from the Google Doc or from somewhere else? Okay, thank you. I didn't
and
follow,
at the top of the Google Doc
you.
has a link to the article. I'll throw it in again. This is somebody's work who's worked with schizophrenics, and she did trial and error, and she discovered that talking to this schizophrenic superego, this toxic superego, has a certain pattern, and by being aggressive with it, with emotionality, not mind games, with intensity, it breaks the shell. It breaks the link that the superego has, and it helps the patient feel less alone. You're being a champion for the patient's inner child, for the patient's being, for the person's soul. This might be spiritual warfare, to try to reconnect the person's being.
Probably fair game, isn't it? If
yeah.
That comes to the forefront, and, well, I mean, as far as it's an invite, kind of, isn't it?
Well, that's the intuition of the Oceanic Union.
Oceanic Union.
An invitation to dance.
Oceanic Union.
An invitation to dance.
I've said it's like a plea from the inner child, but that's only cognitive. with a few more layers, we can maybe open our heart and consider it when it happens. But it might take a lot of exposure to feel it out and genuinely see that this is true. We have to stress test it. We can't just force ourselves to behave differently. So, anybody else offering some stuff? Help me reorient. Figure out a way to make this land it better. Do you have an example, Kelly? I'm confused by your comment about an invitation.
Yeah. Okay, I could try.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, we're talking. Are you ever just having a conversation with someone and they seem to just go away, like they veered off somewhere in the conversation? Like where'd this come from? What's happening right now? I guess. And instead of chasing along with that, maybe giving some pause to say, this isn't necessarily them. It's something that kind of seems like it's taken them over.
Oh, yeah. That could be like,
What was the response? I just related to her. How is she responding to that? What is that? What was the patient's response to intervention? What was the response? I just related to her. How is she responding to that? What is that? What was the patient's response to intervention? What was the response?
I tried that in person a little, and then people freak out because you're not supposed to point out people's responses.
No.
You ran away and you changed the subject. Why did you do that?
Don't call it out. Yeah, no. That does not.
I wasn't trying to I could do it with energy. I was trying to do it calmly, but even doing it calmly with curiosity, it freaked out people. So I got away with it. So it is possible to just ask. But staying curious and recognizing that when people are going one way or another, or people are flooding you.
Oceanic Union.
An invitation to dance.
Oceanic Union.
An invitation to dance.
Maybe it's a plea for help. Maybe it's a plea that they're flooded. Maybe that's the only way they can cry for mercy. If they have a superego that's hijacking their fawn self, their inner children don't have access to language circuits. So they're going to send things out through code. But who knows if anybody can see or hear.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I've got two devices here. It's confusing me. Okay.
Louder.
The mind become is father, faith, and error. So.
And future author. Author of the future.
Okay, which we can't live in the future, so.
We're writing the future in the moment right now. Every moment is.
We're in the future. Yes, we're heading towards that.
Yeah.
So is it, so like, I heard you critical towards 1 and 2. What is 3? I guess I'm still, is that the objective to get to 3?
No, that's what the superego is going to try to do. That you can skip 1, 2, 3.
Okay,
1,
these
2,
are
3
all
is
the superego offering either an infant, a mother, or a father. Okay.
If you want to link this to Freudian model, there's id, ego, and superego. superego is a morality principle. I'm linking that with number 3. The mind. How to become.
Okay.
You need morals
Okay.
to become in the world.
Right.
Okay? Number 2, the ego. That's a reality principle. That is reconcile the id and the ego. Because your pleasure principle, your infant principles, your infant desires sometimes will get in the way of your future. But at the same time, your body has needs like sleep and rest. So you can't be neglecting your body at the cost of the future. So you need to have a balance between id and superego.
Isn't that the function of the ego?
Yes. So the ego helps navigate that, and the ego helps say, what is shared reality? Because the morality principle can get too far in the future that is impossible in reality.
Right.
And
so what is 2 in this model? Or is 2 not existing here?
Is number 2 is the ego. Mother is ego. My other is ego. Belonging. Ego helps you navigate where you belong. In reality and fantasy, how much in reality, how much in fantasy.
Okay.
It's me and we. So that's number 2. And then number 1 is id. Infant. Being. People with toxic superego, they try to flip this into just saying it's a goal-oriented thing. I'll just skip 1, 2, and just go to 3. And I'll just skip number 3 and I'll fake the becoming. Or I'll change other people to make them become what I want, and I'll just get good at that. So it's a superego that takes over the ego, or that doesn't allow the ego space. And then it uses punishment and a few carrots to keep the id a little quiet. A giant 3 paragraphs from Lou, and I'm supposed to correct it or something. Oh. Are social justice warriors an example of toxic superego? Yeah. They're using morality arguments, guilt and shame to try to destroy reality. So superego versus ego. It's being acted out in society. Let's see if I can summarize the question. To my understanding, notions of unfairness implies an internal interaction with the superego that presumes taking care of the inner child by making it feel trapped. It's likely probable in people who were parentified and other codependents. Okay? Interjects using double binds. A solution is to antagonize or attack or question the superego of the results of the double binds and how it's not in sync with reality. And that's what this thing is saying, essentially. Hopefully with the aim of breaking down, then befriending the superego and building a moral compass with a more accurate map of reality. The final paragraph is different from this book, or this article. This article is saying that by attacking the superego will dissolve because it's a construct. If you try to kill the superego, it ends up reifying the superego because the superego is a false superego. It's a construct. So if you try to kill it, you're giving it a goal. It'll just sabotage the goal. Because you're using hate against hate. So actually you need to sort of... Actually, maybe you do have to... You have to use the force against force. In the past, I was at the angle of befriending the superego. I am leaning on trying to dissolve it now. And then maybe as you develop a healthy ego, then you can slowly build a conscience and have morals and principles. IFS might want to take this superego as a persecutor and then flip it into a protector part. I don't know if it works with toxic superegos. That's a goal of IFS, internal family systems. Was that helpful for anybody? What shall we say? Let's do a little thing on moral injury. Get some space, then we'll try to finish the tips after that.
Moral injury is damage to a person from experiencing something that violates deeply held moral expectations.
So I think that the moral injury from childhood creates an opening that allows your superego to get hijacked by an introject. And never again an omnipotence defense, a moral defense from a child where you want to cling to utopia, so you have a goal. If you can change enough, your family and your parents might not get divorced, your parent might not drink. You can somehow punish yourself and shapeshift yourself, judge the world somehow, and then that gives you a hope fantasy that you have some control currently, and that you might have some sort of future authoring. So you're taking on the father role for the family, instead of just saying, everyone's fucked up, I don't know if I'm going to get a meal tomorrow, I don't know if we're going to get kicked out. Who wants to take that stance as a child? You'd rather take this stance as like I can do something about this, so I'll make up some fantasy defense. And that'll be fueled by a moral judgment. But when it gets fueled by the moral judgment, a superego introject. Your superego can get hijacked. So this is where people get moral injuries a little older, to sort of show how the dynamic works. But it can also work when you're young.
Moral expectations are right at the very core of who we are as people and who we are as societies. It's what we build our lives on. It's what matters. It's what we value. It's what we love. It's our system of love. And we love the things that we look up to and work toward, are willing to serve, and in some cases die for. I think there's good evidence that we are all hardwired from before birth to try to embody goodness, morality, love, compassion, empathy.
We're probably hardwired to have a moral superego, to have some sort of overlay to navigate how to interact with the world, how to get stuff done, how to work together with people. So we need some moral substructure to navigate, and part of that moral substructure is to mimic what's out there. Religions and smaller communities used to have more structure to provide that. Now that there's less God is dead and religions aren't playing that role, moral values aren't role modeled. Wasn't it like Charles Barkley in the 90s saying, I'm not your role model? Or was that the 80s? That was decades ago. Because kids are looking for role models in the world, so they look to athletes, but athletes are just good at the sport. That doesn't mean they know how to be a person or how to live a moral life, how to succeed. So now we have role models as social media influencers, but social media influencers are great at performing, creating a fake persona. Well, it's not that annoying. So we're lacking role models, and so maybe we're hardwired to have morals.
Caring. We all know that those are the right things. They give us joy. Of course, life brings us to our knees over and over again because we can't always meet our own moral expectations.
Right there, when life brings us to our knees, that's the I position, where we feel like an infinite ant. If we think that being in the I position is being vulnerable and all bad, we just want to hate ourselves when we're doing anything vulnerable. We want to punish everybody else's vulnerability. We have no starting position. We're giving up our ground on our own if we have some superego that's decided to just attack our infant inner child and anybody else's infant inner child. It's healthy to fail and be brought down to your knees and see if you can get reborn. See what's left over after you die, after you're exhausted.
Others can't always meet our moral expectations. And then the challenge is, okay, now what? Experiencing something that violates deeply held moral expectations. Okay, now what? Okay, now what? Okay, now what?
So do you take your agency and author your future? Or you just stew in unfairness and keep doing the same pattern again and again and again, repetition, compulsion? That would be probably a hijacked superego that's trying to do that. Let's do some Michael Meade. So traditionally there's an initiation. So the superego that people develop as a child and a teenager is supposed to die.
To accept the gift of life means to walk the road towards death. So on a factual basis, you could actually say, so far, everybody who lives dies. But on a mythological, on the mythos side, what you say is, die before you die, for in that way you will truly live. So wait a minute, I thought death meant the end. No. There's little d death and there's big D death. Big D death is when you come to the end of the road and you've done it. You've done it well, you've done it poorly, whatever. You're out of rope, you're out of string, you're out of thread, you're out of cord. You know, it's about to end. That's big D death. But in the meantime, on the way to that big D death, we're supposed to die a bunch of little d deaths. And the little d deaths could be called, if you want to get psychological, the death of the ego. The ego, by the way, you know, is a little bit of a makeshift thing.
Sometimes we refer to ego, maybe it's superego. So the fake superego, the mask, our fallen self, needs to die. And die again. And then we get reborn. So that's part of the faith in error. We have to have faith in making mistakes, and we have faith in the process that when our fallen self fucks up, we can get a new one, and we keep improving it, improving it, improving it. In the old days, you had initiations and you had stories, grand narratives that would say that, oh, ego death is a good thing, or superego death in the current metaphor, but in the old days they're talking about ego death. Different
That's
pointer.
Supposed to get us through childhood and out of the house, and after that it's not that good, you know. I mean, it's secretly it's scared, and it's, you know, more or less pretentious. I'm not with those that say get rid of the ego because it knows where the car keys are, but it doesn't know where it's supposed to go. And so the ego has to die, and that's called little d death. And when the ego dies a little bit, when we accept the fact of failure or the fact of our own kind of frailty or our own cruelty or whatever it is that we have to accept, in those little deaths we find that deeper part of ourselves that is capable of growing. And through surviving those little deaths, a person gets more prepared to face big D death when it shows up. Am I making sense? Yes. And so with the world the way it is now, there's lots of opportunities to have these little deaths because there is so much radical change and so much uncertainty and so much disturbance that the mythos side of it, which would be die before you die, is the way to go.
So you aren't, sometimes there's some saying like you aren't living until you know what you're willing to die for. So there's probably your infinite aunt. Your infinite aunt also has a taste of infinity. So there's a bit of fearlessness in the scared shitless baby, your pure being. But it needs to have something that it's willing to die for. It needs to have some mission so that it can have little deaths and get reborn. That's the mythic narrative. That's the grand narrative. That's what was there before our scientific revolution, where we're all materialist and enlightened in whatever this current era is.
And this is something that Rumi says. In order to understand the actual drama of the world we're in every instant there is a dying and a coming back around. The poets say, this world is a moment, a pouring forth that refreshes and renews itself so rapidly that it seems continuous. Just as a burning stick taken from the fire looks like a golden wire when you swirl it in the air. In that way, we feel duration in time as a string of sparks of awakening. But secretly, it's disappearing and renewing in a continuous way. Why is that meaningful? You look at a part of the world that goes on fire, or suddenly there's a devastation, whether it comes through natural causes or it comes through human interaction or human destruction, and it seems like it's nothing but the end, but actually, in a way, it comes back again. I think we have to start voting for it coming back, acting for it renewing.
So the older stories, the grand narratives, would have some cyclical nature. So the elders and the adults would be telling these stories of renewal, rebirth. But it's less common now, so maybe that's also part of why we get stuck with antiquated superegos. So this is Vaknin's framing of serpent voice. See if it has any parallels. Serpent voice versus God, silent voice of God.
Garden of Eden, for example. Let's look at what the serpent had said. You need to learn new things. Knowledge is power. You need to educate yourself. You need to improve. You need to expand your horizons. What every modern educator is telling today to children. The only thing which is a bit jarring, a bit like out of sync, you're going to be like God. If you were to listen to this voice of the serpent, you would have said, wow, it's a great friend. He wants me to learn. He wants me to educate myself. He wants me. But look at the result. You know? So you need to isolate the serpent in your head from God's voice.
Yes.
What is God's voice, by the way? The voice of God is silent. That is you. God is you. Your authenticity, your authentic voice is silent.
Your ego.
Silent. The voice that talks all the time and makes suggestions and masquerades and improves you. And
fake superego.
That's not you. That could be society. If you work hard, you will make money. If you make money, you will...
That will be society. That's something interjected to give you a map of how to navigate society, or a map of how you navigate your family.
Have the beautiful house, you'll be happy. And so that's also not you. Any voice that speaks is usually not you. Any voice that speaks is usually not you. And if you had been exposed to a narcissist, he, first of all, eliminates all the other voices, monopolizes the space. And then the voice that speaks inside you, after you had left the narcissist physically, is the narcissist. You must get rid of this voice. It's the serpent.
Yeah.
You must listen to the voice of God. The voice of God is silent.
But it's silent. And the superego voice is...
I'm monologuing! I'm monologuing! I'm monologuing! I'm monologuing! You can't interrupt me. You just have to let me emotionally vent. I'm monologuing. I'm monologuing.
The serpent voice is very good, taking up all the space. So if you just ignore it, maybe it's not enough. That'll be the finishing the paper. Some more tips on how to dissolve the superego. The superego hijacked. The hijacked superego.
But of course, given the right incentives, God also speaks to humanity, to humanity, to humanity. When push comes to shove and he has a clear message and so on, he speaks. Listen to that voice. And the other voice never stops speaking and masquerades as your friend, and masquerades as your friend. The active voice in your head, which is the narcissist, is going to use all the right language. It's going to say boundaries. It's going to say healing. It will feed off anything you learn. All the techniques and the exercises, they're immediately hijacked by the narcissist. So if you went to therapy and the therapist taught you to have better boundaries, next thing you know, the narcissist will take these and will render you aggressive.
And aggressively
and conflictive
do
and
those teachings.
violent.
So you lose all your friends, you're isolated, and you're now vulnerable to the next narcissistic relationship.
So that's boundaries. You do inner child work. So the narcissist will infantilize you. He will use the inner child, he will leverage the inner child techniques and so on to infantilize you. Everything you learn can and will be used against you by this internal voice. If you don't first silence it, you will feel that you're losing an excellent, good friend. There's an emotional price for this process. Because as you transition from the active voice to the passive voice, you will feel very, very alone. Very, very alone. There's an emotional price for this.
So you'll feel alone. So if you have a co-historian or a support group to be with you, to be by your side and fight this superego hijack, maybe we can make the aloneness a little easier to tolerate.
The narcissist isolates his victims from their support network, social network, family, friends, you name it. And then it becomes their world. And so getting rid of a narcissist means getting rid of the world. There's a huge sense of existential loneliness in
getting rid of the world. That's my other mother. Oceanic merging. But this type of oceanic merging annihilates the self, has no room for difference, doesn't have room for each person's being.
The transition from the active to the passive voice. There's an emotional price for this. There's an emotional price for this. There's an emotional price for this.
So I think his method is to sort of do a counter monologue and sort of drown it out. Ravella Levin's approaches these 7 steps. Okay, 7 steps. Not bad. So, do's and don'ts when speaking to the superego. Number 1. Use your hostility. Here is an opportunity to vent your frustration with the patient. Additionally, if you are really concretizing, you will be angry at the introject for trying to harm your patient. You can speak loudly, you can swear, you can use vulgar language. In addition to the other benefits mentioned, you will delight the patient when he or she sees and hears you behave in this disrespectful manner to what is, to him or her. The awe-inspiring sacred superego. So if you behave disrespectful to the sacred superego, they will be in awe. It is as if one were able to say to the Queen Elizabeth, "Liz, baby, you wear ridiculous hats." Then there's like 2 and 3 some other things. So, but I'm still trying to internalize this. I usually think morality is off limits, but if this works and people seem to like it, I will try to figure out this technique or my flavor of how to do this. Number 2, never look directly at the patient when speaking to the superego. For some reason, I find myself looking to the patient's right. I don't know whether this is significant. One must be certain that the patient does not think the therapist is being hostile to her, only to her superego. So John Fredrickson would try to externalize, this is a defense, this is your punitive part, this is your self-attacking, and then try to attack it indirectly, or try to separate it, or use the triangle of conflict and say that this is a defense against anxiety, and anxiety is your core feeling, we're just attacking the defense. Or we're talking to the defense is getting in the way. Or the defense is causing the guilt. The superego is causing the guilt, not me. Not the world. The superego is flooding you with anxiety. The superego is being punitive. Number 3, the superego may tell the patient not to listen to me, or that I'm lying or that I'm crazy. The therapist must advise the patient that this is one of its lies and it is becoming afraid of the therapist. So, I think this says that the superego is a bit of a wuss, and that it uses deception to try to hold on to stuff. Because it's a construct. It has no physical reality, so it can't throw actual punches. It needs to trick the host to do something. It's just a voice. It can't do much. Number 4, when the superego says it hates me, I know I have done something very therapeutic. Otherwise it would not be so hostile. One can explain precisely this to this patient, who's likely to be frightened when the therapist first hears that. When this happens, I demonstrate my delight very overtly with a big smile and joy in my voice. The time to worry is when the superego likes the analyst. It may mean the analyst has fallen into some sort of trap. So there will be love bombing from the superego to try to follow that defense. And then there will be superego injunctions that will be vicious and judging. And when it's judging worse, that's signs of progress. This is counterintuitive. And number 6. 7, okay, number 5. The superego threatens that if the patient does not do a particular piece of behavior, she will feel guilty. On the surface, it may appear that the superego is protecting her from guilt. However, one must remember it is only the superego that can make the patient guilty. The superego is causing the guilt. That's why the superego can predict the guilt. That's pretty good. It's evoking the guilt, and it's causing the guilt. So it's evoking, so it's predicting it. So remind the patient that the correct phrasing of the statement is, if you do this or you do that, I will make you feel guilty. That's what the superego is saying. But he's not taking ownership, because the superego has also learned that running from the I statement and playing pronoun games is a master mind trickery thing. To have floating agency, floating sense of agency and will to constantly, where is the attack coming from? And that also amplifies paranoia. The superego is unlikely to say that, since it would show that the superego is responsible for being the bad one. An appropriate response for the therapist would be, are you going to try to make her feel guilty? Okay, then by all means. She should do it because she can truly say, she hurt you. Number 6, patients must be warned that one cannot kill the superego. Though they frequently express a wish to do so, killing implies it has reality. It is a fantasy, so it can only dissolve. Trying to kill it will only lead to frustration. Concreteness does not make reality. The superego, no matter how concrete it feels, is still only an interject. I think Richard Grannon had the Socratic method question, and then trying to Socratically question the superego started getting quiet. tried to disappear because it couldn't back up the argument. You're shit, and then you say, well, why? Well, how do you know that? How should I know? And then the voice got weaker. This is an interesting thing for closing it off. Number 7, if the patient says or does enough things that would ordinarily make him or her feel guilty, and does so in a defiant, reckless, not sneaky way, the guilt will begin to subside, because the superego will see that it has lost the ability to intimidate the patient in that area. This is probably what the teenage Zoom bombers are naturally doing. They're recklessly breaking rules to erase early superego fears, to differentiate from their parents, to get approval from the tribe and try to find approval from the bigger world. So trying to use moral injunctions and threaten FBI stuff that would actually motivate them to do more reckless, in-your-face troll bombing. And then we can see how anybody in this room that was trying to do moral injunctions on the Zoom bombers, that's how much you still think that moral outrage does something to the world. That's tricky, because your superego wants you to stay intimidated. It doesn't want you to recognize.
Someone doesn't need to play by your rules.
Sometimes things are unfair.
Someone doesn't need to play by your rules.
Sometimes things are unfair.
And even if you have a legal argument, they could play the legal game like Trump is in the legal system now and drag it out and still not get consequences. Even breaking rules that are policed can lead to. So, furthermore, the patient's ego will grow with the freedom to do the previously forbidden behavior. So it's like a seesaw. So if you have like a toxic superego, the more you do reckless behavior or you test it, you do new behavior, the patient's ego will grow, your ego will grow, and your superego will get less hijacked. One trap the therapist must avoid is that of becoming intimidated by the patient's superego's extremely fierce attack when the patient does something new. Warn the patient that this may happen and advise him or her that it means that he or she has truly hurt the superego. That is, otherwise it would not be reacting so ferociously. This is a victory, not a defeat. The fact that the patient can do a previously forbidden behavior means that the superego has to some extent lost control. Isn't this the pointer where you're using?
Try something else. See what happens.
Try something else?
Try something else. See what happens.
Just try it. Try new things. Try something else. Just try it. Don't have to be so munged up. Don't have to be so munged up. They'll work out one way or another. I don't have to be so damn worried about it. Just say it.
That's what you're feeling.
Just say
it.
it.
That's what you're feeling.
Just say it.
That's what you're feeling.
Just say it.
That's what you're feeling. This is a victory, not a defeat. The fact that the patient can do the forbidden behavior means the superego has to some extent lost control. For the superego to lose control means that it is much closer to dissolution. Freedom is that much closer. It is very much a matter of economics. The stronger the ego, the weaker the superego. So a hijacked superego is getting in the way of reality testing. Communicating with the Schizophrenic Superego Revisited by Rivella Levin, PhD. PDF version in the top of the link. What's the time? It's not 10 o'clock, right? It's getting there, though. So, how do we close this down? How do we summarize? How do we can go deeper in the after party, but any comments about the slight tweak on how to deal with the superego? We need help. You can't heal alone. You need somebody else to teach you how to fight and dissolve superego hijack.
Need willing help.
Willing help, a witness, someone that has capacity to give you space to refine your voice and try something different and recognize those changes as gradual baby steps. Okay, so maybe we need somebody maybe we need like teenagers, so maybe the Zoom controllers gave us a gift. They showed it's possible to not have a superego, a sadistic superego. Did those troll bombers seem like they were moralizers? Did they seem crippled by outrage or unfairness? They were snubbing their nose to it. They were fully free. They were rather fearless. They didn't know the ways of the world, but they were not
willing to jump in, yeah.
Worried about dependence and all this other stuff that the rest of us were crippled by. I could have made a little meme from our video clip from Dan Ed, where he was shit-talking codependents. Like, you guys just get over it and whatever.
Yeah, that was great. Could you put that on the meme? I don't think he's a minor. He had a little beard there. He might be over the age of 18. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. He could have been a little older.
What do you think,
but...
Ellie?
I don't know. Hard to place him. Yeah.
It's quite an experience.
Early 20s, if anything. Yeah.
What an interesting experience that was.
Yes, so that was a gift they gave to show it's possible to not be paralyzed by a superego.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they're sort of not functional as an adult yet. That's where they need to develop a healthy superego to develop some morality so they can build their future. But they're showing that it's possible to exist without being paralyzed by a toxic superego. So, let's do this and then we'll do Dan, maybe. So...
If I'm unconsciously avoiding the facts of reality, then what I'm doing is I'm saying, reality is too hard for me. I can't help you.
Sorry, you're going to have to face that reality by yourself. Yeah, that's too painful for me. Why is it people don't want to work with adolescents? Too damn painful.
Yeah.
Wow, you were really screwed. Yeah, I tried to work with your parents and they refused to work with me. I referred them to other people. They refused to work with them. I guess it's just you and me. And yeah, you're right. I can do absolutely nothing about your home situation. We're both screwed. What can we do together to help you make it these next 2 years and prepare you for the final exit? If he says, I think it's just hopeless to have a better relationship with my mother, I might say, that may be. We'll find out over time. But at least we could help you have a better relationship with yourself so you wouldn't have to get depressed and wouldn't have to put yourself down. In his book on denial, Theodore Dorpat makes a fundamental point. He says every defense is based on the denial of reality. Here, this guy's saying, is there anyone here that can face this reality with me?
I mean, it's hope. Dead
Well,
on.
the precondition for hope is that two of you can face reality.
So this might be what we need. Two people to face reality. Face the reality that the superego is out to torture you forever. And then reality isn't that scary to face because there's two people facing reality. If it's just you facing reality, then the superego, that's the guide. It's taken over the role of moral principle to face reality, to navigate reality. So you need somebody else to be by the side, co-historian, to face reality. And teenagers have that, still are developing that teenage, or some, I'm sure there's a lot that have been squashed.
There's going to be no hope unless both of you can face the facts on the ground of, like, we have to face totally what is hopeless here.
Yeah.
And having figured out what we cannot do, then we can figure out, okay, what can we do? See, adolescents oftentimes think therapy is bullshit. Do you have a clue why now? If we don't tell the truth, they know we're bullshitting. They know the truth because they're living it every day. They're just wondering, is there anyone here that can face a painful truth? And it's not too much for him to bear. It might be too much for you to bear.
Right.
But actually, he's already bearing it. You're never pushing reality on it. It's not that, oh, this will be too much for him. No, what's too much for him is bearing it alone. When you just describe this in a really blunt, matter-of-fact way, someone understands me. Someone can face the truth with me. I'm not alone. I am knowable. Someone is not scared of my truth.
So we have to do 1, 2, 3. So we have to be with the person's belonging. We have to provide. We have to be with the sadness and the fear. The problem with the scared shitless baby in 1 and the sadness in the 2 is the scared shitless baby is divorced. So the scared shitless baby is going to projectively identify and get you to feel the terror. And then the superego is going to take over the 3 position and is going to say all the rage and anger stuff. So you're going to feel fear and you're going to interpret it as all the insults and all the other crazy stuff. So somebody needs to join that reality is scary. And I'm here with you for reality. And for ISTDP is trying to make sense of the grief and try to put the fear and the grief into words. And then finally the patient can say, somebody finally gets me. 1, 2, fear and sadness get addressed. And then 3, the mind hijack has to be reclaimed. Maybe that'll be rage versus rage or attack versus attack. I'm being sold on it by the paper, and I'll try to figure out my flavor of how to do that.
See, he has not had too much reality. He's had too much loneliness. He's had too much denial.
The loneliness has to be
How do we
addressed.
connect?
Yeah.
Through honesty about reality in this moment. Right. Beyond said, psychotherapy is an exercise in faith that the patient can become healed by becoming at one with the emotional truth of this moment. We talk about compassion, right? Compassion comes from the Latin, to suffer with. It's a co-suffering. In that co-suffering, the patient feels, oh, you know me, you feel me, you understand. Speaking the truth about horrible things is hard for everyone. Who wants to talk about that? Who wants to feel that? Who wants to speak to that? Yeah. And yet these things need to be said. They need to be felt and put into words. Yeah. Facing the truth so we can get clear about what's not possible, and then to be clear what is possible, and then just do what is possible.
wouldn't that be somebody who's taking on the father figure role realistically to try to give advice to do what's possible in reality so that you can become something? So that's building the ego. And then maybe we can pull some inspiration from Dan Ed. Let's see if I can shortcut by searching 4 minutes to 25 minutes transcript. What were some of his insults? $11. Unmute.
So can
That's a very good fucking question that they can't answer. His insults.
If I can, I'll disposal some
disposal
shrooms to all of us, and maybe we all need to take a 3-5 of shrooms and realize that we don't need these whores in our life, and that we could just walk the fuck on freely and call it a fucking day. So can
That's a very good
I get it's
question
hard
that
and
they
shit.
can't answer.
So it's one thing we're gonna. If I can, I'll disposal some
disposal
shrooms to all of us, and maybe we all need to take a 3-5 of shrooms and realize that we don't need these whores in our life, and that we could just walk the fuck on freely and call it a fucking day. So can
That's a very good. Oh, that's why. Cat found it.
Gonna occur through it, but at the end of the day, we're gonna get through it. And we're gonna boss up on these motherfuckers. Fuck these talking. You want me here to talk about?
Well, there, we're gonna boss up on these motherfuckers. So he's using fantasy versus fantasy. His morality is like totally out the wazoo for fantasy. So he's just doing the opposite of the crippling superego and just doing this adrenaline high of being an asshole. Can't you sort of see that energy? He's taking this high, like, if I break something, that means my superego is some master thing. I've made adults cripple in rejection. That's this energy. Like, we're gonna take this motherfucker, blah, blah, blah. It's all infantile. But he's articulating the infinite potential that the superego can just make up shit.
And that's just one thing we're gonna occur through it. But at the end of the day, we're gonna get through it. And we're gonna boss up on these motherfuckers. Fuck these talking. You want me here to talk about why we should leave it? These motherfuckers ain't finna change.
You got some balls to jump in here and stay in your frame, but codependents don't have that self definition. They don't have these boundaries that you can do.
Man. I don't have boundaries either, but
well, you can say
putting up with the same shit for so long and there's no change, then you're just doing it to yourself.
You can say that. Codependents, they can't say that to themselves. Or they say it and they keep going back.
Who are you codependent on? Your mother?
Ah, see, he ran out of answers. And he's right. It's a mother issue. Intuitively. My other belonging were crippled by chasing this fake enmeshment, this repetition compulsion, but we need the being first. We need the scared shitless and the sad baby. Need that with somebody as a companion, co-historian, limited reparenting, and then now we can reclaim your mind. We can build in a new father structure.
That's all, folks.
$9.52. That's, really long. Is anyone inspired? Is anybody depressed? Does anybody have any takeaways, emotions? Was it somewhat successful, or was it all total failure? Next superego didn't like it.
You need an answer.
Yeah, that's sort of the goal.
Yeah. Some
I'm
proof.
not sure how you identify whether you're speaking to a superego or not.
Well, that's the you have to learn how to hear the voice. That's in the paper, and then that's essentially turning doubt on doubt. So if the superego is using paranoia, and the world seems scary, if you invert the doubt onto the doubt and try, whose voice is this? Is it trustworthy or not? And just spend some time there, it'll rise to the surface.
Over Discord.
It'll rise to the surface over Discord, or how do you...
Apparently it can, and I'm really not sure about that yet. How that you can so swiftly identify that you're speaking to a superego over Discord.
Well, if it's speaking in injunctions and all it wants to do is destroy stuff, and there's no constructive stuff that fits two of the qualifiers in the paper. If the superego is creating a morality that has no future, has no adaptive quality, then it's not doing the morality principle right. It's a thesis, it's a theory, and then you test the theory, and then if there's evidence that it continues, you stay with that thesis, and if there's evidence that it's off, then you create a new thesis. That's faith in error. Father, faith in error, taking risks, and assessing what happens afterwards. That would be the ego reality tester trying to test reality, see what's just, see what's happening. The superego is just, it's a voice. It's not... It's seeing through...
What's the difference between a superego and a moral?
Well, the superego hijacks the morality principle. Yeah. So yeah. I think a moral is like...
Or how can you tell the difference whether it's a superego or a moral? How can an observer tell the difference?
In what kind of situation? In what kind of context?
Anywhere.
Well, if it's a moral, it's superego territory.
Yeah. But, so...
So what's the question?
I feel like, so it is... I was reading there's two... See if I can find it.
Ah.
Shoot it!
I can just turn off them, and then when the...
More outrage!
The superego has cultural rules, critical moralizing, your conscience, taboos, parents' requests.
So there's two components of the superego? Is there two components? The ethical component of the personality and provides the moral standards by which this ego operates. So, you sort of paint the superego as always this evil thing.
No, that's the sadistic superego hijack, whatever I...
Okay, so talking about two. There's sadistic superego, and then there's the moral superego.
The healthy superego.
Or the ethical. Yes, okay. Yeah, so Ellie's question is, how can you tell the difference?
Well, that's in the paper. There are tips of what toxic superego looks like. But you don't fight a superego with another superego. I think that's the assumption of the question. You fight the superego by defiance. That was number 7, right? You fight it by trying something else.
Try something else.
Just try it. Try new things. Try something else.
If you disprove the superego's moral rules, if it's hijacked, then it exposes itself.
So in the paper, is the schizophrenic superego the toxic superego?
Yeah.
In the paper?
She worked with schizophrenic patients, but she said it also works with, it can be used for personality disorders and codependence.
Okay.
Didn't say codependence in here because codependence is a non-standard label that mental health doesn't really recognize.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a really great way to devoice someone. It's to just say to them when they're expressing themselves to you, I'm just talking to your toxic superego right now. So I don't
many
need to
ways
bother
to dismiss a person.
furthering this. And I'm not going to answer your concerns or your questions right now because I'm just talking to a toxic introject that has nothing to do with me. That's a really good trick.
Well, then that would be to say whether or not the person that's doing it or the person receiving it, who's hijacked, whose superego is hijacked. Yeah. And if we're in a support group, most likely all of us have some sort of childhood or some history of trauma, so we all have some level of superego hijack. But my earlier argument was that if we're trying to use moralizing against a superego, healthy or unhealthy, that's probably not going to do much, because that's using mental energy versus mental energy, a mental energy that's already hijacked, where the superego is scared of taking action and emotional intensity. Because it's the father figure that's missing, the father role. I've tried to make that argument with a couple times on the Zoom and got into trouble. Actually, I think I tried to say that the feminine is abandoned, but I was also trying to talk about the father figure is abandoned. And the father figure, as a role, is about future authoring. It's about faith in error. It's about the path of mastery, the path of becoming, the path of competence. A moral structure that's been hijacked, there's no future. Or everything is a future based on one little thing. One mistake means the future will collapse. Splitting projection, all or nothing. It's not easy, because
it's good to be skeptical too.
That was Richard Grannon's early tips, even though it seems like it only goes so far with him. Socratic questioning Let's see what he said back then. Or wait, maybe it's just talking to yourself is a skill. How do you talk to yourself?
I want you to develop the skill of talking to yourself. Because I think that this is a cornerstone of sanity and self-protection. Out loud, if you've got the privacy, I don't see why not. If it helps you to think it through, you could take notes, you could journal the questions that you're asking yourself. But when I say talking to yourself, you want part A and part B to be able to have this conversation. I'm asking you to go for context, not content, predominantly. You want to be strong, you want to be asking the question. That's what philosophy is, it's dialogue. You want to be talking to yourself, which is what thinking is. It's a question and an answer a protocol, system. Ask a question. So you'll have just asked yourself, is it really? And then another part of you goes, oh, I suppose it is. Right? You just did that. Question and answer. That's what thinking is.
So learning how to critical think is trying to reclaim the mind. If your mind doesn't have the permission or the space to critically think and talk things out and go back and forth, then that might be a sign that the morality principle has been hijacked a bit. And that's difficult. I was going to try to go lay out a moral development map, and I had a Vaknin clip that I was making, but somehow didn't save right. So that half hour or more of work is... But in Kohlberg's theory of moral development, there's 6 stages, and there's 3 levels. So level 1 is the most primitive, pre-conventional. Then there's conventional, and then if you fully grow up, you can meet level 3, post-conventional. Vaknin makes an argument that narcissists and psychopaths don't even have stage 1 and 2, where Kohlberg and a couple others agreed with that. There's no 1 and 2. They just still have no superego. They have no self or something. But there's another person who says the narcissists and psychopaths can do stage 1 and 2, and I sort of think they can. Because stage 1 is punishment, obedience. So a hijacked superego motivates just through punishment and obedience, operant conditioning. So that's the lowest level of moral reasoning, but it's also the fastest and the most effective if people are regressed, both people are regressed. So might makes right. So punitive power erases and is the authority of what's happening. And then number 2, look out for number 1. So that's where you're transactional in love. So codependent sometimes fall into number 2. Withholding love as a transaction. I will hold on to my moral outrage and think it will motivate the narcissist or the abuser. But if the narcissist and the psychopath or the person with the hijacked superego doesn't have 1 and 2, they have no morals. They have no conscience. That's been one of the critiques. If you're using moral outrage on somebody with no conscience and you're thinking that's going to motivate them, then maybe you're a bit crazy. You're doing something that makes no sense. Holding on to moral outrage, trying to get someone to change who has no morality, who has no conscience, you're yelling into the void. That's probably why it feels like that. So conventionally, I think most people are here, then when they get initiated, they might get to 5 or 6. So conventionally, they might be at stage 3 or 4. Stage 3 is you're a good person. You'll try to not break any rules so you won't get in trouble. And then you'll try to follow law and order and obey laws, not get into trouble. But narcissists will try to win and try to get away with stuff. So they're not worried about not getting in trouble. They're worried about trying to get away with stuff. And they actually have a thrill that they got away with stuff. So. And in America, we sort of reward the people that break the rules and get away with stuff. So if you develop more mentalization, you can reach level 3, and level 3 is post-conventional moral reasoning. And that's stage 5, where you recognize there's an unspoken social contract, so you try to follow rules that are outside of spoken rules to try to do things that are mutually beneficial to everybody or to more people. So instead of just what's good for me or what's good for one person, you start looking at what's good for more people. How am I investing in the future? How am I investing in the community? How am I trying to get more win-win-win-win? And number 6, Vachman was saying no one reaches this, or very few people reach this. I'm not sure. It depends on how you describe universal ethical principles. I would simplify this to say stage 6 is you start living based on principles. So then you follow the path of humanity and virtue. That's the classical path. So you're not just living based on laws. You might break a law that goes against your principle, or you'll live for the principle and you'll break the rule, because the principle is more important than the rule. So this sort of morality is, maybe that's sort of like a hardened conscience. So it's not a voice that's saying, do this safe, not safe, or whatever. This is about stay on the principles and defend it until you die. They're worth dying for. Do you have a superego that's willing to put yourself in danger because of a principle? That is willing to lose and fail to learn, even if it's for someone else. If you're living for a cause, are you willing to put your life on the line for a cause, for somebody else's benefit? Am I willing to go get merged with whatever invasion, whatever, and then maybe somebody else will benefit? What's my interest in trying to get grooming and whatever the cause is of crazy making in my head? No personal benefit for me outside of, I guess, to learn more and grow more, but I'm putting myself on the line based on a principle or based on faith. So the moral development isn't just moral development. This is a social map. This is a map of society. Your morals help you navigate society. Neurotypicals maybe have hijacked this because there aren't enough role models at stage 5 and 6. They haven't even done stage 4 because they're performing stage 4. And then that's the imposter syndrome. So you have a lot of academics and you have a lot of bureaucracy of people in these roles. But it's performative stage 3. Or it's stage 2, and they just learn how to surface look like a good person because they're a politician. They're a lawyer. Purple wiggle.
the Wiggles a thing outside of Australia?
Wiggles?
The Wiggles. That's like
Yeah.
a classic. Yeah, it is.
It's a little kid show, yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
From a while back. Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
Can't say as I was a big fan, but
Oh,
I have been forced to watch some. Yeah. Who was?
Must be the generation gap.
Yeah, no. The Wiggles, Bob the Builder. There's a few. That think not familiar. We'll have to look it up. Missing out, yes, probably. I've got something else to go chase after. So kind of pushing the toxic superego out of the way a little bit.
Yeah. I kind of got a bit distracted. I have heard it 3 times.
No, it was good. It was probably necessary to clear the field a little bit.
Sorry, G.
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But Zoe got a little bit of a preview. So how did digesting the preview to now, the rewatch and whatnot?
Definitely making more sense, and I've had about a day to sort of start to try to see it in myself. So yeah, noticing when it's trying to paralyze me and separate me from people.
So Zoe is building this muscle, being aware of it. Just from getting a bit more explanation and a bit more context, having someone to explain, to give some more framework, and now she's able to slowly spot it, and maybe that's all that's necessary. The superego is going to counter it and say, "You got to do it now," and it's going to freak out because this news is so potentially threatening. But if the superego is dissociating you and you're getting frantic, that might be evidence this is working. And then I will try to figure out how to attack that superego lovingly. Because I still think we don't need to do hate on hate, because that's moralizing against moralizing.
Yeah, I get some feedback like that too.
So if I can try to fight for your soul, if I can preach and try to embody the spiritual warfare that's going on, as part of trying to reconnect your being, to be a savior for your soul, maybe that sort of aggression is the right match for the torturous aggression, the torturous hate.
Mm-hmm.
The trap would be to use hate against hate, because then the superego like, oh, there's proof. So the superego could use moralizing versus moralizing, because it doesn't have reality to restrict it. Fantasy is its strength. So it's going to use any emotion to the excess, but it doesn't know loving emotions. That would be my assumption.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like you'd want to telegraph it.
Telegraph what? The loving attack?
Either way you decide to go, depending on...
No, the superego doesn't. You could telegraph it. It's all mind games.
Because it's dumb. Right, okay.
Well, it's limited. It's smart and
or
it's dumb.
limited. Okay, that's maybe too pejorative. Yeah.
It's limited in that it has reality testing. It runs out of ammo.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you reality test it, the ammo doesn't get exposed.
Right.
It just needs exposure to reality. It just needs to be pressured a little. It might be a certain formula. The formula I haven't figured out. Ada's raising her hand. You want to ask something verbally?
Yes.
Or...
Hello,
Okay.
everyone. Can you hear
Sure.
me?
Yeah.
Yes. My first time attending. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. My question is, when you were talking about the father figures and you were saying about, I guess, the critical or toxic superego, so the reason for that and like whether it's the passivity or lack of action or the things, some of those, the negative aspects, you said it's the lack of like the critical thinking father figure role, which would have taught the children how to think more critically as opposed to emotionally. Is that the idea?
How to use the mind to become. How to use the mind to navigate shared reality. How to use the mind to navigate mind games. Was there any more?
No, you said you had spoke about it before. Do you have like more details or something or a reference?
Oh, more details and reference. About the father figure or reparenting in general?
The father figure as it relates to what you were saying, and I guess that the critical thinking, or I don't know if that's the same thing or if it's just an aspect of it. What you were saying about the action and stuff like that.
Oh. Well, there's many flavors. This is sort of working with Mad Baby. So 3 is Mad Baby, 2 is Sad Baby, and number 1 is Scared Shitless Baby. So.
Okay, I'm just meeting them today. So.
Yeah. So directing your aggression and using your criticism and being angry productively, that is the skill of number 3. That is something that the father usually teaches the child. So we can just say the father role. So we have a society where there is a lack of that. So we don't have role models of how to direct our aggression. And sometimes
be mad productively so
yes,
that, you can use that anger to create,
yes.
Something as opposed to just turn it back inwards or in a
instead of hating yourself, you're using self-hate. You can now direct it and take on the world and create stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that Carla McLaren one playing in my head right now.
Yeah, because that's the way a lot of these, like the great companies and a lot of things, they got mad and they did it better. Kind of.
Yeah, they're frustrated and they keep doing it. So if you're driven to do something and keep doing it when you're frustrated, probably that thing has some meaning, has some deeper meaning, because you're willing to invest a lot of energy and keep failing. You're willing to take risks. You're willing to make errors and have more faith. Mm-hmm. That is the father energy that has the imagination to create something in reality that has some level of permanence. And also anger allows you to label your boundaries and find your boundaries.
Anger is always about boundaries. How you set boundaries in such a way that you don't destroy the boundaries of other people. Anger is always about boundaries. How you set boundaries in such a way that you don't destroy the boundaries of other people. Anger is always about...
But mad baby anger is a very touchy subject in mental health, so it's hard to just give you a quick answer, because it's a skill that you have to sort of master. You have to get used to, you have to learn how to direct it, you have to build some tolerance, you got to build a muscle, take away the judgment that conflict is all bad. But a lot of my channel has a lot of content on that. Mad baby, what matters, father stuff. If you search the channel, you can find that, or you can give me a specific theme, and then maybe I could forward some stuff.
Thank you.
Oh, so for new people, the after party is anything goes period. The Zoom meetings can go on for a couple hours or past midnight. Sometimes there's a lot of chaos and conflict, and other times it's boring. It's a mixed bag. I can't predict what's happening in the after party. Occasionally, or usually, we act out some of the formal topic, but I'm not. That could be interesting, or that could be terrifying. So, stay at your own volition, and feel free to drop off whenever you want to. And then we'll switch to the cat massage video. Even though St. Thomas is pretty hopping now. That bar. D2.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, not a seat. Oh, there's some.
That's good vacation time.
At the bar, yeah.
And Tyson's Corner Mall was packed. And then there were more people dressed up, so I don't know if there's like parties and proms going on.
Oh, yeah. Is that graduation prom time of year?
That time of year. So summer's around the corner.
Yeah, we're already getting summer here. It was 86 degrees yesterday. Too much.
Ooh. I enabled the waiting room.
Do we have customers?
Unable. I'll disable it. I doubt it will have. I think I figured out that I posted the link in the description of the live stream.
Oh.
And then people can search live streams for Zoom links. And that's probably how they got the link and put it in the Discords and the shared places. Since it's not
and then
there.
They can watch themselves live. Zoom bombing.
Not too. Yeah. So they're just hungry for anything. So they were just scouring for anything live. If I don't put in the description, it's not likely.
Yeah, it looked like it's a cottage industry too, though. One of those bigger named ones has. I went on the Discord just because I was curious. It looked like there was a spot you could submit videos and things. Mm-hmm. See if you end up monetizing it.
There's a couple of channels that have like a million subscribers. So it seems like a lot of comments, so people enjoy watching it. So.
Mm-hmm.
Ha ha ha.
Hey, UPS. How's it going?
So I pulled this visual from August 21st, 2021. The other side of the visual was this. Counterdependence versus codependence. And it was breaking down dissociation and cognitive distortions as a summary of all defense mechanisms. And then visual from August 21st. So, but I didn't really share the, I didn't really explore the right part much. wrote it in the in-person meeting, but I didn't cover it much on the Zoom. I don't know if I covered it much there, but no. On revisit in the morning, I said, "Oh, that's a pretty good framing. 1, 2, 3," and link it to the id and the superego, blah blah blah. But then I did a little revisit of that meeting, and I made a little clip. And back then I had a theory that it was a reparenting issue. So that came out in the discussion during the after party. I made this edit. I thought it could have been an intro, but I went with Chantal's story and instead. But we can try out this and maybe see if this might get some momentum going for after party. The difference between counter and codependence. And this blocking reality, recognizing that they're flooded, that's why they're blocking reality. Throw anything out there that you'll fight that changes the topic. What they're saying, the goal is just to block reality. So that's why it's not truthful. Yeah. If they're blocking reality, they're using lies. But the goal is just to block feedback. Throw anything out there that you'll fight that changes the topic. The doorway is positive spin, but it's not about the narrative. It's about the emotion. That's the tricky thing I haven't figured out how to teach yet. See, so the superego, hijack, is good at the story and twisting the story and playing mind games. The entry point to sad baby and scared shitless baby is the emotions. And then in the transference, the emotions you're feeling in the counter transference from the projective identification might be the inner children of the other person. The scared shitless baby and the sad baby that's trying to evoke and induce those feelings in you. They're already in motion with the emotion. We're trying to contain it with a story, or they're trying to dump it on us with a story. You can get underneath the story, pre-story, before the story is just raw emotion. It's working intuitively. That's why I haven't gotten the language yet. It's a pre-symbolic emotional interaction. You're just directing the dysregulation. You become the sort of guiding force of the dysregulation. But if they give you the anger and somehow you can redirect or channel that dysregulation where you don't act it out.
Oh, God.
That's sort of the Holy Land, or that's my vision or my intuition that this would be the better way.
It's like being a lightning rod and taking the lightning and throwing it into the ground.
Dump it into sad baby.
Shove it into the ground.
Earth. Let it dump it into the earth and shared humanity. So if you can see the pain that the other person, their inner world, if you can see their humanity, then you see their desperation, then it's a little easier to not take it personal. Or to try to listen to the inner plea. This is not easy, but that was the theory, and I'm making gradual progress. Pass through you into the ground. The issue is reality is flooding them. They need help blocking reality or filtering it. So we help them filter reality. So the issue is before annihilation anxiety, annihilation terror, I think, is engulfment anxiety. And the reason why engulfment anxiety is overlooked is because people focus on abandonment terror. But really they're afraid of engulfment anxiety. Because engulfment anxiety is a fear of getting flooded.
Oceanic union. There is no clear sense of where I am and where you are.
Utter annihilation. Madness is the abyss. Madness is
oceanic union. There is no clear sense of where I am and where you are.
So I think people, when they're afraid of abandonment terror, they're afraid their containment partner disappears. They're afraid the relationship disappears and they'll get flooded by their internal content. So they're really scared of engulfment anxiety. And then, but they're with you, and then the reality is flooding them. So they need to block reality, and they need you to help them block reality. So then they play in the cognitive distortions game. And then when they're blocking reality, then you try to counterbalance and share reality. So there's a misread. There's an imbalance of navigating reality, so you try to fix their cognitive distortions. And then you also might be feeling the flooding, and you don't want to be flooded. But you don't want to be flooded as taking away their space from them drowning. So they're not able to articulate that they're being engulfed and they're flooded and they're terrified. So they induce it into you through projective identification, transference, whatever the terms are. That doesn't require comfort. It can include some of it. The circuitry's already there. They're projecting their self onto you. They've given you all the power. We just don't know how to use it. There's probably too much power. That's why it's...
Well, it's ultimate power.
Yes, see? They're treating us like a god.
Yeah.
That's why it's ultimate power. That's why it's flooding. It's overwhelming. That's why we don't want it, because we don't want to be their god. Because we're also the bad god that fucks up everything. That's being flooded. They're trying to say they're flooded, non-verbally, but they're acting it out. Because that's a regressive wound. They didn't have a voice to talk it out, so they have to act it out. It's a plea for help.
But the way I've dealt with my mother in the past is to treat her like a naughty little girl. She quite likes that. She might initially get upset about it, but when I say to her, oh, what would your father think, and all that sort of stuff, talking to her like she's 5 years old actually does work. She's 80.
I think she really wanted me to play a role.
Angry daddy?
Yeah, she really did.
Angry daddy.
So what's missing is the parent, right? What would your father say about your behavior? Stuff like that.
That was the only way that was the only way she could motivate herself, was through shame. To get herself to do anything was to shame herself. And she really wanted me to shame her in the same way that I felt she abused herself. And I couldn't do that. I found it all fucked up, and I couldn't.
He couldn't do that because he had a moral principle. But for her, since she was trapped with that sort of self-hate, maybe the doorway was to communicate there. That was the invitation that Kurt was feeling pulled to. Yes, it sounds like a mother talking to a child using guilt, but it's giving a positive goal. The approval of a father. It actually has something that's not super sadistic. So it's still an improvement from a sadistic superego hijack. Because if you go in there with just something totally caring, then this hijack will just overwrite it. Because a hijack is there 24/7. But this is just through random. This is what Kurt and Brad just randomly tried, and it had some effect.
Didn't play that.
Oh, it is.
Game.
That's because it is, yeah, completely. It's a way of giving them a childlike boundary that they never had.
Us as a god could do it gradually. So a childlike boundary. So even if it's a scolding energy, it's a boundary. It's a condition that gives some containment. It gives them some space to to see that this is not allowed, this is allowed. So you might be speaking to an inner child that has a sadistic superego that's just saying bad girl, bad girl, bad girl. It just has no boundaries, just looping around torture. So if you give it a disciplining boundary, it's still an improvement. Waited. So we do it, match them first, and then we can slowly scale back, and they follow along. Yeah, but what if it's that simple? So
me to shame herself, and I couldn't do that. Couldn't play that.
Oh, it is.
Game.
That's because it is. Yeah, completely. It's a way of giving them a childlike boundary that they never had.
Us as a god could do it graduated. So we do it, match them first, and then we can slowly scale back, and they follow along. So this is very similar to the graded pressure approach of ISTDP, where you're grading the pressures higher and higher, building capacity. Yeah, but what if it's that simple that if you become the scolding parent, but the higher road scolding parent, you slowly activate their inner parent. Somehow that never got turned on. It didn't get turned on. There wasn't space. There wasn't... It didn't get turned on in the right time, and then now as an adult, if it tries to turn on, other adults shut it down.
If you need to play parent for your parents, maybe then you don't get a chance to activate your own inner parent because you're actually, because you're doing it for someone else.
Yeah.
Based on just their needs and whatever. So how would you get any role model there?
You don't have role models. That's why you grow up and you have a developmental blind spot.
Yeah, exactly.
But if the developmental model is that it's graded, so your parents slowly give you bigger boundaries and bigger things so you can slowly take care of yourself gradually through preteen, teen, adult, following other people doing the same path. Now as an adult, where are you going to learn gradual build up? There's no space as an adult. You have to act like an adult. There's no space to slowly build capacity.
Right. Nobody knows you're working towards that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
So you need an artificial environment as a proxy, the sort of co-historians to help you witness, to help you reclaim your sad baby and your scared baby, and then slowly build the capacity to channel your anger, your aggression, to step forward, and step forward more boldly, one step at a time. And then once you get momentum, the process takes over. You don't need as much help from other people, but you do need to get moving in this new path and get to some sort of momentum, some sort of flow state.
And doesn't that naturally not destroy, but replace that toxic ego, superego? Because if you build up the sad baby and mad baby, they can counter naturally the toxic superego, because there's not enough real life proof that you don't need it anymore. Because I think that toxic superego also tries to destroy the mad and sad baby.
What exiles it? Yeah, it tortures it. Sure.
So if they come up again and they get more space, then that toxic superego has to give up some space, because it cannot be at the same place with sad and mad baby. I don't think it's possible.
Oh, the more the other parts are integrated, then the superego, the toxic one, can't take up as much space and it'll start dissolving.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there might be some automatic displacement. Let me finish this. It's a graded process, so your superego is going to want to control it, because that's what self-help and support groups and mental health has done. It's an overly controlling mechanism. So trusting the natural process of healing and the natural pull to become whole and complete, and listening to those signals and cooperating, that seems slow and gradual and whatever.
It is, but is it slower than fighting or